I'm Samantha, 31 female. I live in a city where data is the new gold, and my job is to be the best miner there is. I have a quiet apartment that overlooks a small park, a life I've built for myself through years of relentless study and work. It's a stable, predictable existence, and I've always valued that stability above all else. My family, on the other hand, seems to thrive on chaos, a storm I've spent my entire adult life trying to navigate from a safe distance. This story is about the moment that storm finally broke through my defenses. It's about a demand for $20,000, a destroyed laptop that represented my entire career, and a father who chose to defend the son who broke it instead of the daughter who built it. But more than that, it's about how I used the very skills my father never understood to dismantle the toxic family structure he spent a lifetime creating. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. In the ecosystem of my family, my brother Leo has always been the peacock, and I, the diligent ant. He was born with a charm that seemed to bend the world to his will, a head of messy blonde hair, and a smile that could disarm a firing squad. I was born with a quiet determination and a mind that saw patterns in everything. While Leo was out charming his teachers into giving him extensions on assignments he'd never do, I was in my room, color-coding my notes and teaching myself how to write code. Our father, Frank, a retired sales executive, saw Leo's charisma not as a crutch but as a superpower. To him, Leo was the golden boy, destined for a life of fame and excitement. My ambitions were, in his words, safe. Safe was a four-letter word in his vocabulary, synonymous with boring and uninspired. Frank's career had been built on personality and handshakes. He saw the world as a stage, and those who commanded it were the winners. He never understood my fascination with the silent, intricate world of numbers and algorithms. When I announced I was pursuing a doctorate in data science, he'd clapped me on the shoulder with a bemused look. "Sure, Sammy, whatever makes you happy. Just don't forget to live a little, huh?" Meanwhile, when Leo, at 16, declared he was going to be a rock star, Frank bought him a vintage Fender Stratocaster that cost more than my first car. The guitar gathered dust in a corner for 6 months before Leo moved on to his next passion, filmmaking. Frank funded that too, buying him a camera that was promptly left on a bus. This pattern repeated itself throughout our lives. Leo's whims were treated as bold artistic ventures, my achievements were treated as predictable milestones. He was the passion project, I was the blue-chip stock, reliable, steady, but ultimately unexciting. My mother, Maria, a librarian by trade and a peacemaker by nature, spent years trying to balance the scales. She was the one who celebrated my academic scholarships with quiet pride, who framed my degrees and hung them in the hallway. But her gentle support was often drowned out by Frank's booming enthusiasm for Leo's latest, fleeting obsession. "Give the boy a break, Maria," he'd say whenever she'd gently suggest Leo should get a part-time job. "You can't put a timeline on genius." By the time I was 31, I had become a successful data scientist for a major tech firm. My work was complex, demanding, and incredibly rewarding. I specialized in predictive modeling, creating algorithms that could forecast market trends with uncanny accuracy. My primary tool was a custom-built, top-of-the-line laptop. It wasn't just a computer, it was an extension of my brain. It held terabytes of proprietary data, complex software suites that cost a fortune, and weeks of meticulous work on any given day. It was my livelihood, housed in a sleek, graphite-colored chassis. It was also a symbol of everything I had built on my own, without a single handout from my father. Leo, at 27, was working as a part-time barista and fronting a band that played to sparse crowds in dive bars on Tuesday nights. He was still living in a small, subsidized apartment, perpetually one crisis away from needing a bailout. And Frank was always there, ready to play the hero. He'd cover Leo's rent when he was a little short, pay off a credit card bill filled with charges for new effects pedals and band merchandise, all while telling me how proud he was of Leo for sticking to his guns and not selling out. The irony was that Leo's entire life was one giant sellout, funded by our father's retirement account. I knew, because my mother had confessed it to me in worried whispers, that Frank was dipping into their savings far more than he was letting on. The dynamic was exhausting, but I had learned to compartmentalize. I loved my brother in that abstract way you love family, but I didn't respect his choices. I loved my father, but I had long given up seeking his approval. I had my career, my financial independence, and a carefully constructed wall between my life and their chaos. I believed that wall was impenetrable. I thought that by being the responsible one, the one who never asked for anything, I was immune. I had failed to account for one critical variable: the sheer, unmitigated audacity of their entitlement. The storm was coming, and my carefully built wall was about to be proven woefully inadequate. It would all start with a phone call that would set in motion the collapse of our family as I knew it. The phone call came on a Wednesday evening. I was in the middle of a complex data model, mapping out consumer behavior for a new client. The project was high stakes, with a significant bonus attached to its successful and timely completion. My laptop was humming quietly, processing millions of data points. When my phone buzzed with Leo's picture on the screen, I sighed, saved my work, and answered. "Sammy, just the sister I wanted to talk to," he began, his voice buzzing with an artificial energy I recognized instantly. It was his "I'm about to ask for something huge" voice. "Hey Leo, what's up?" I kept my tone neutral, leaning back in my chair. "I have the most incredible news," he said, practically shouting. "You know that producer I was telling you about, the one who worked with the Black Keys? Well, he heard our demo. He loves it. He thinks we're the next big thing." I highly doubted a Grammy-winning producer had randomly stumbled upon my brother's SoundCloud page, but I played along. "Wow, Leo, that's great." "It's more than great, Sammy. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. He wants to produce a 5-song EP for us, in a real studio. And he's got connections to get us on a small indie label tour as an opening act. This is it. This is the break we've been waiting for." I could feel the but coming, hanging in the air like a guillotine. I waited. "But," he said, his voice dropping slightly, "we need to front the costs. Studio time, production fees, a bit of money for tour support. It's an investment, you see." He said if we can show we're serious by putting up the initial capital, the label will be much more interested. "How much capital?" I asked, my voice flat. I already knew the answer would be ridiculous. He took a deep breath. 20,000. I almost laughed. It was so absurd, so perfectly Leo. $20,000. He might as well have asked for a unicorn. "Leo, I don't have $20,000 to give you." "Oh, come on, Sammy," he scoffed. "Don't be like that. I'm not asking you to give it to me. It's a loan, an investment. I'll pay you back with interest as soon as we sign the deal. You work for that giant tech company, you make a ton of money. 20 grand is like, what, a trip to the grocery store for you." The ignorance of that statement was breathtaking. The years of education, the 60-hour work weeks, the immense pressure of my job, all of it was reduced to a trip to the grocery store. "Leo, $20,000 is not a small amount of money for anyone. I'm saving for a down payment on a house. I have my own financial goals. The answer is no." "But this is my dream," he whined, the charming facade cracking to reveal the petulant child underneath. "My one shot. I can't believe you'd be so selfish." "It's not selfish to manage my own finances responsibly," I said, my patience wearing thin. "I'm sorry, but I can't help you. You should try getting a business loan if you're so confident it's a good investment." "The banks don't get it, they don't get art." He spat and then hung up. I shook my head, a familiar mix of frustration and resignation washing over me. That, I thought, was the end of it. But I had forgotten about the ace up Leo's sleeve, our father. The call from Frank came less than 10 minutes later. "Samantha, what the hell is this I hear about you refusing to help your brother?" He started, no greeting, no preamble, just straight to the attack. "Dad, I'm not having this conversation. It's between me and Leo." "The hell it is," he boomed. He is your brother, your family. He comes to you for a little help to finally make his dream come true, and you slam the door in his face. After everything I've done for you. Everything you've done for me? I asked, my voice rising despite myself. Dad, I paid my own way through grad school. I've never asked you for a dime. What exactly have you done for me that warrants me handing over my life savings to Leo for his latest fantasy? I gave you a roof over your head for 18 years, he yelled. I taught you a work ethic. And this is the thanks I get? You hoard your money while your own flesh and blood is struggling to catch a break. It's your duty, Samantha, your duty to help him. The word duty hit me like a physical blow. My duty was to work hard, be responsible, and never be a burden. Leo's duty was apparently to have dreams that I was now obligated to fund. My only duty is to myself, Dad. I'm not his personal bank, and I'm not yours. The answer is no. It's final. You're a disappointment, Samantha, he said, his voice cold and sharp. You've got a heart of stone. He hung up. I sat in the silence of my apartment, my heart pounding. The data model on my screen seemed a million miles away. This was the pattern, the toxic, looping algorithm of my family. Leo wants something. Leo gets told no. Frank intervenes with accusations and guilt. Usually it was my mother who caved. But this time, the pressure was on me, and I refused to break the cycle in the way they expected. I spent the next 2 days in a state of high anxiety, ignoring their calls and texts, throwing myself into my work as a refuge. I thought that by holding my ground and refusing to engage, the storm would pass. I was wrong. They weren't just going to knock on my door. They were going to kick it down and take what they believed they were owed, one way or another. For 2 days, a tense silence fell. My phone, which had been buzzing with angry texts from my father and pleading ones from my brother, went quiet. I allowed myself a sliver of hope that they had finally accepted my decision and moved on. It was a foolish, naive hope. They weren't moving on, they were regrouping. The assault was about to enter its next phase. It happened on Saturday afternoon. I had just returned from a run, trying to clear my head of the family drama. I was in the kitchen making a protein shake when there was a loud, insistent knock on my apartment door. I froze. I wasn't expecting anyone. Through the peephole, I saw Leo, his face stormy, his shoulders hunched. I considered not opening the door, but I knew he wouldn't just leave. He'd make a scene. With a deep, resigned sigh, I unlocked the door. "We need to talk," he said, pushing past me into the apartment before I could even say a word. "Leo, I've said everything I have to say. The answer is no. You need to leave," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "No, you don't get it," he said, pacing my living room like a caged animal. His eyes were wild, darting around the space, taking in my furniture, my books, the symbols of a life he clearly resented. "This isn't just about the money, Sam. It's about respect. You don't respect me. You think I'm a joke." "I think your financial planning is a joke, Leo. That's different," I countered, crossing my arms. "I'm not going to throw away my hard-earned money on a project you haven't thought through for more than 5 minutes. I've been working on this for years," he shouted, his voice cracking. "This is my life's work, and you, with your stupid charts and numbers, you just write it all off." His eyes landed on my work desk. My laptop was there, closed, a sleek, unassuming rectangle of graphite. But to him, in that moment, it was the monolith from 2001, a space odyssey. It was the embodiment of everything he wasn't. It was the source of the money I was denying him. It was the fortress of my success, and he had come to lay siege. "You sit here in your ivory tower judging me," he sneered, walking towards the desk. "Looking down on me because I don't wear a suit and play with spreadsheets." "That's not fair, Leo, and you know it," I said, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. "I've never judged you for your choices, but you have to live with the consequences of them." "Consequences?" He laughed, a bitter, ugly sound. He reached the desk and stared down at the laptop. "You want to see a consequence?" Before I could process what he was doing, he grabbed the half-full glass of water from my desk and, with a flick of his wrist, appended it directly onto the keyboard of my laptop. Time seemed to slow down. I watched the water cascade over the keys, seeping into the seams, into the ventilation ports. For a second, there was no sound except for the quiet drip of water onto the floor. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I could only stare at the puddle forming on the surface of my entire professional life. Then, as if that wasn't enough, in a final, explosive act of resentment, he swept his arm across the desk, sending the laptop crashing to the hardwood floor. The sound of the chassis cracking, a sickening crunch of metal and plastic, finally broke my paralysis. A scream tore from my throat, a raw, primal sound of pure horror. "What did you do?" Leo looked down at the wrecked machine, his chest heaving. The wildness in his eyes had been replaced by a flicker of fear, the dawning realization of what he had just done. But there was no remorse. Not yet. "That's the consequence," he whispered, then turned and fled, slamming the door behind him, leaving me in the echoing silence with the corpse of my career on the floor. I stumbled forward and fell to my knees beside it. The screen was shattered. A spiderweb of black and green lines. Water was still trickling out of its broken frame. I knew, with a certainty that was bone-deep, that it was utterly destroyed. The custom components, the encrypted solid-state drives, the years of archived work, the active, multi-million-dollar project I was currently managing, it was all gone. My first call, through shuddering, hysterical sobs, was to my father. I thought, foolishly, that this would be the line. That hearing his daughter was in professional ruin because of his son's violent tantrum would finally wake him up. "Dad," I cried into the phone, "Leo, he was here. He destroyed my laptop, my work laptop. He broke it." There was a pause. I expected shock. I expected anger at Leo. What I got was a sigh, a tired, disappointed sigh. "Samantha, calm down. What did you say to him to get him that worked up?" The question was so stunningly inappropriate, so profoundly unjust, that it shocked me out of my hysteria. What did I say to him? I told him no, and he destroyed my property, my livelihood. Okay, Frank said, his voice taking on a placating tone that was more infuriating than anger. "It's just a computer, Samantha. You can get another one from your company. It's not the end of the world." "It's a $7,000 machine with proprietary data for my job, Dad. This is a catastrophe. They could fire me for this." "Don't be so dramatic," he snapped, his patience gone. "Look, your brother has a temper. He gets it from me. He was frustrated. Maybe if you hadn't been so high and mighty and just helped him out, none of this would have happened." And there it was, the final, unforgivable betrayal. It wasn't just that he was excusing Leo's behavior. He was blaming me for it. My brother's violent, destructive act was my fault. My refusal to be their personal ATM had provoked him, and therefore I was responsible for the consequences. I was the villain of the story. He was the victim. A strange, cold clarity washed over me. The tears stopped. The shaking subsided. My grief and panic were being flash-frozen, crystallizing into something hard, sharp, and purposeful. Anger. "I see," I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. "I see now." "Good," he said, misinterpreting my tone as acquiescence. "Now, just get a new laptop, and we can all move on from this. No need to make a big deal out of it." "Oh, I won't be making a big deal out of it," I said, looking at the wreckage on my floor. "I'm going to be making a very, very small, precise, and calculated deal out of it." I hung up the phone before he could reply. The line had been crossed. The family I thought I had, flawed, dysfunctional, but a family nonetheless, was an illusion. In its place was just a business arrangement where I was expected to provide all the capital with none of the returns. The golden boy had finally broken something that couldn't be easily fixed, and his most loyal enabler had just declared war on the wrong daughter. The game had changed. And I, the data scientist, was about to change the rules. The 24 hours after the incident were a blur of damage control. I filed an emergency report with my company's IT and security departments, explaining that my work laptop had been irrevocably damaged in a domestic incident. The words tasted like ash. I was mortified, explaining to my boss, a man who respected my professionalism above all else, that a family dispute had resulted in the potential compromise of a major project. He was surprisingly understanding, but firm. The project was on hold until I had a new, secured machine, and the lost time would have to be made up. The cost of the replacement laptop would be covered by the company, but the incident would be noted on my record. The freelance work I did on the side, a significant portion of my income, was completely dead in the water without my machine and its specialized software. The financial hit was immediate and substantial. I ignored the 57 missed calls from Frank and Leo. I blocked their numbers. I needed silence. I needed to think. The initial tidal wave of rage had receded, leaving behind a cold, hard shoreline of resolve. This wasn't just about a broken laptop anymore. It was about the systemic dysfunction that had allowed it to happen. It was about a father who saw one child as a precious, fragile dream and the other as a utility. To understand the present, I realized, I needed to fully understand the past. And for that, I needed to talk to the one person who had been there for all of it, the silent archivist of our family's history, my mother. My parents had divorced 10 years ago, a quiet, amicable split that was, in reality, a surrender. My mother, Maria, had simply grown tired of fighting a losing battle against Frank's personality. They remained friends, but she had built a life for herself on the other side of town, a peaceful sanctuary filled with books and quiet routine. When I called her and asked if I could come over, my voice still hoarse, she simply said, "I'll put the kettle on." Sitting in her cozy, sunlit kitchen, I told her everything. I didn't cry this time. I laid out the facts in a calm, linear progression: Leo's demand, my refusal, his violent response, and Frank's justification. She listened patiently, her teacup cradled in her hands, her expression a mixture of sadness and something I couldn't quite place: validation. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. "I'm so sorry, Sammy," she said finally, her voice soft. "I'm sorry he did that to you, and I'm even more sorry about what your father said, but I can't say I'm surprised." "I know he's always favored him," I said, the bitterness rising in my throat. "But this is a new level, to defend him, to blame me." She sighed and looked out the window. "This isn't new, Samantha. The scale is new, but the pattern is as old as Leo is. Your father hasn't just favored him, he has been actively funding Leo's inability to function as an adult for his entire life. To an extent you don't even know." This was the opening I was looking for. "What do you mean?" My mother got up and went to a small filing cabinet in the corner of her study. She pulled out a thick, worn accordion file labeled Household. For the next hour, she and I undertook an impromptu forensic accounting of my brother's life, with my father as the lead underwriter. She pulled out old bank statements, credit card bills, and letters from collection agencies that she had kept, she admitted, just in case. The evidence was staggering. Frank hadn't just been helping out. He had been systematically draining his and my mother's shared retirement savings, both before and after the divorce, to finance Leo's failures. There was a $5,000 payment to a community college Leo had dropped out of after one semester. There were multiple credit card statements, with thousands of dollars in debt from failed business ventures. A t-shirt printing company, a drop-shipping website, that Frank had paid off in full. He had co-signed a loan for a ridiculously expensive used sports car that Leo had wanted for a music video. Leo had defaulted on the payments after 3 months, and Frank had been forced to pay the remaining $12,000 to avoid having his own credit destroyed. The most damning piece of evidence was related to their joint investment portfolio. Maria showed me statements from before the divorce, where Frank had made hardship withdrawals without her full knowledge, claiming they were for home repairs. He had recategorized them in his personal records, but the statements from the investment firm told the real story. He had pulled out nearly $40,000 over 5 years, all of which coincided perfectly with Leo's various crises. "I found out about most of this after we separated," my mother said, her voice heavy with remembered pain. "When we were dividing the assets, he had cooked the books, trying to make it look like the market had just performed poorly. But I knew it was for Leo. A chilling realization dawned on me. The 20,000 he wanted from me was because he had nothing left to give. My mother finished my sentence. He's tapped out his personal savings. He's probably taking more than he should from his pension. He didn't come to you as a first resort, Sammy. He came to you as a last resort. He was trying to use your money to plug the newest hole in the sinking ship of your brother's life because his own bucket was empty. It all clicked into place. This wasn't an entitled request, it was a desperate one. Frank's frantic, aggressive pressure wasn't just about defending his golden boy. It was about protecting himself from the consequences of his own disastrous financial enabling. He wasn't just defending Leo's actions, he was defending his lifelong, ruinously expensive investment in him. If Leo failed, then Frank failed. And my refusal to provide the $20,000 wasn't just a rejection of Leo. It was a judgment on Frank's entire philosophy of life. The destruction of my laptop wasn't an isolated act of rage. It was the violent, inevitable conclusion of a system 27 years in the making. A system built on secrets, lies, and a financial foundation that was rotten to the core. I looked at the pile of documents on my mother's table, the raw data of our family's dysfunction, and my mind, the mind of a data scientist, began to work. Anger is a powerful fuel, but it's messy and inefficient. Data, on the other hand, is clean. It's logical. It's irrefutable. My father and brother had dealt with me using emotion, manipulation, and violence. I was going to deal with them using a spreadsheet. "Mom," I said, my voice now steady and clear, "can I make copies of all of this?" She looked at me, a flicker of apprehension in her eyes. "What are you going to do, honey?" "I'm going to do what I do best," I replied, pulling out my phone to start photographing the documents. "I'm going to analyze the data, identify the critical failure points, and implement a new system. A system with accountability." The investigation was over. The planning was about to begin. I spent the next week operating like I was on the most important project of my life. My new work laptop arrived in a sterile brown box, a blank slate that felt alien in my hands. I dedicated my days to rebuilding my work environment, meticulously reinstalling software, and trying to recover what I could from cloud backups. I worked with a feverish intensity, driven by a new, cold fire. But my nights were dedicated to a different kind of data analysis. I took the copies of the documents my mother had given me and began to digitize them. I built a comprehensive spreadsheet, my fingers flying across the keyboard of my personal computer. I created columns for dates, amounts, sources of funds, and the stated purpose of the withdrawal versus the actual purpose. I cross-referenced bank statements with credit card bills and default notices. I created a timeline, a visual representation of my father's 2-decade-long secret bailout of my brother. What emerged was not just a story of parental indulgence, but a pattern of escalating financial recklessness that was, frankly, terrifying. The total came to a staggering $87,450. That was the amount I could definitively prove Frank had diverted to Leo from shared or retirement assets. It didn't even include the countless smaller cash handouts, the covered rents, or the years of paying for his car insurance and cell phone. This was just the major league, documentable malfeasance. Next, I calculated the cost of Leo's recent rampage. The replacement value of my laptop was $6,899. I then calculated my lost income. Based on my freelance contracts, the 2 weeks of downtime would cost me approximately $14,000. I added a small buffer for potential penalties from my main job, rounding the total damages to a neat $21,500. Armed with these two numbers, $87,450 and $21,500, I began to build my plan. This wasn't going to be a screaming match. There would be no emotional appeals. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry or yell. I was going to treat this like a corporate restructuring. I was a consultant brought in to fix a failing enterprise, and the enterprise was my family. My first step was to consult a lawyer. Not for litigation, but for strategy. I found a sharp, no-nonsense attorney who specialized in family financial disputes. I paid for a 2-hour consultation and laid out the entire situation, complete with my spreadsheet and supporting documents. She listened intently, her expression unreadable. When I was done, she leaned back in her chair. "Well, Ms. Reed," she said, "you have 2 paths here. Path A is the legal one. You sue your brother for the damages. You'll win, but getting the money from him will be like getting blood from a stone. Your mother could also potentially take civil action against your father for mismanagement of marital assets, especially those prior to the divorce. It would be messy, expensive, and it would torch your family to the ground." "What's Path B?" I asked. "Path B is leverage," she said with a small smile. "You have a mountain of it. You use the threat of Path A to achieve a private settlement that gives you what you actually want." "And what do I want?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "You don't just want money for your laptop," the lawyer stated, looking at me over her glasses. "You want this to stop. You want your father to stop hemorrhaging money on your brother. You want your mother's financial future to be secure. And you want your brother to finally face a real-world consequence. You want to force a systemic change." She was exactly right. This was bigger than $21,500. This was about severing the toxic financial cord that was strangling all of us. Together, we drafted the framework for an ultimatum. It was a 3-pronged strategy. First, restitution. Leo and Frank would be held jointly responsible for the full $21,500 in damages. It was crucial that Frank was on the hook for it, as he was the enabler and the only one with any actual income via his pension. We drafted a legally binding loan agreement from me to them, with a clear repayment schedule. Second, accountability for Leo. The money was not enough. Leo had to take concrete steps toward self-sufficiency. This would include mandatory enrollment in anger management therapy, proof of which had to be provided to me monthly. Furthermore, he had to secure and maintain a full-time job with benefits. No more part-time barista gigs to support his art. Third, and most importantly, securing my mother's future. This was the masterstroke. Frank had proven himself to be a reckless steward of their shared financial past. He could not be trusted with their shared future. The ultimatum would demand that Frank sign oversee complete and irrevocable control of his largest remaining asset, the family home they still co-owned, to my mother. He would be allowed to live there for the rest of his life, but he would have no ability to borrow against it, take out a reverse mortgage, or use it as collateral for any of Leo's future schemes. It would protect my mother, and in doing so, remove Frank's primary bailout tool. The lawyer helped me draw up the necessary documents: the loan agreement, a personal conduct contract for Leo, and a quitclaim deed for the house. They were cold, clinical, and utterly ruthless. "Are you sure you want to do this?" she asked as she handed me the folder. "There's no coming back from this. You're dropping a bomb on your family dynamics." I thought of the sound of my laptop cracking on the floor. I thought of my father's voice on the phone, telling me it was my fault. I thought of my mother's worried face as she showed me the drained retirement accounts. "A bomb is exactly what's needed," I said, taking the folder. "Sometimes you have to burn the whole thing down to build something new." I went home and sent a single, joint text message to my father and brother. It was the first communication I'd had with them in over a week. "Family meeting, my apartment, Sunday at 2 p.m., be there, it is not optional." There was no pleading, no anger. It was a summons. The board of directors was being called to an emergency meeting to address the company's insolvency. And I was coming armed with a restructuring plan that would save the business, even if it meant firing the CEO and his favorite vice president. The air in my apartment on Sunday afternoon was thick with unspoken tension. I had asked my mother to be there, not just as a witness, but as a key stakeholder. She sat quietly on the armchair, a pillar of nervous strength. I stood by my new desk, the folder with the documents resting on its clean, unblemished surface. I had chosen this spot deliberately. The absence of my old laptop was a silent powerful testament to why we were all here. Frank and Leo arrived exactly at 2. They walked in with a nervous swagger, a transparent attempt to project control. Frank's face was a mask of stern disapproval, the look he wore when he was about to deliver a lecture. Leo just looked sullen, avoiding my gaze, his eyes fixed on the floor. They clearly thought they were walking into another emotional confrontation, an arena where they excelled. They were about to discover we were playing a different game entirely, on a field of my own choosing. "All right, Samantha, you called this meeting. What's this all about?" Frank began, his arms crossed, taking up his position as the patriarch ready to pass judgment. I didn't answer immediately. I let the silence stretch, letting their discomfort grow. Then, I picked up the folder. "Thank you all for coming," I said, my voice as calm and measured as if I were beginning a corporate presentation. "I've called this meeting to discuss the ongoing financial and operational insolvency of this family unit and to present a mandatory restructuring plan." The business jargon threw them off. Frank's brow furrowed in confusion. Leo looked up, a flicker of interest in his eyes. "What the hell are you talking about?" Frank grumbled. I opened the folder and took out the first document, my spreadsheet. I didn't hand it to them. I held it up. "I'm talking about this. This is a detailed summary of all major financial contributions you, Dad, have made to Leo's various endeavors and debts over the past 15 years, using funds from shared marital assets and your retirement savings. The documented total is $87,450. Frank's face went pale. He shot a panicked look at my mother, who met his gaze with a steady, unflinching calm. The mask of authority was gone, replaced by the raw fear of exposure. That's a private matter," he stammered. "It became my matter when your systemic enabling of Leo resulted in a significant financial loss for me," I continued, my voice like ice. I put down the spreadsheet and picked up the next page. "This is an itemized invoice for the damages incurred. It includes the replacement of my professional equipment and the loss of freelance income. The total is $21,500. This is the bill for Leo's temper tantrum." I slid the invoice across the desk towards them. Leo flinched as if it were a snake. "This is ridiculous," Frank sputtered, finding his voice again. "We're not paying that. It was an accident." "It was a criminal act," I corrected him smoothly. "Destruction of property, and I have a witness, me. I also have a lawyer who is very confident we would win in court, but I'd like to avoid that. I find litigation to be inefficient." I let that word hang in the air. This was my world now: efficiency, logic, consequences. "So," I said, leaning forward, resting my hands on the desk, "E is the plan I've devised to resolve this situation and ensure the long-term viability of this family's assets. It is not a negotiation. These are my terms." I laid out the 3 points of the ultimatum, like I was outlining a project plan. "First, restitution. You too," I said, looking from Frank to Leo, "will be signing this legally binding loan agreement, making you jointly responsible for repaying the full $21,500 to me. The payments will be automatically withdrawn from your pension, Dad, on a monthly basis for the next 3 years. Second, accountability." My eyes locked onto Leo. "You will enroll in and attend weekly anger management therapy. You will provide me with receipts for each session. You will also find a full-time job with verifiable pay stubs. You have 60 days. Your days of being a part-time barista and a full-time financial drain are over. This is non-negotiable." Leo opened his mouth to protest, but Frank, seeing the storm on my face, put a hand on his arm to silence him. "And third," I said, turning my gaze to my father, my voice dropping slightly, "the most important point, securing Mom's future." I picked up the quitclaim deed. "You, Dad, have proven yourself to be a catastrophically irresponsible steward of the family's primary asset. Therefore, you will be signing this document, which transfers full ownership of this house to Mom. You will retain the right to live here, but you will never again have the ability to use it as your personal piggy bank to fund his failures. You are being removed as a financial decision-maker." The room was utterly silent. The gravity of what I had proposed settled over them like a shroud. I had systematically dismantled Frank's authority, monetized Leo's tantrum, and seized control of the family's financial future. Frank stared at me, his face a maelstrom of shock, rage, and a dawning, horrifying respect. He was a salesman, and he had just been outnegotiated, outmaneuvered, and utterly defeated. He looked at my mother, searching for an ally, but she just gave a slow, deliberate nod. She was with me. "You can't do this," Frank whispered, the words hollow. "I can," I said simply. "And I will. This is the offer on the table. You can accept these terms and we handle this privately, or you can refuse. If you refuse, I will walk out of this room and file a civil suit against Leo tomorrow morning. And Mom," I glanced at her, "will be filing her own suit against you for the recovery of her share of the retirement funds you misappropriated. The choice is yours: a controlled, private restructuring or a public, legal demolition." I slid the folder containing the loan agreement, the personal contract, and the deed to the center of the table. I placed a pen on top of it. "You have 5 minutes to decide," I said, and then I stood back, crossed my arms, and waited. The point of no return had been reached. The next move was theirs. The 5 minutes I gave them felt like an eternity. Frank stared at the folder on the table as if it were a bomb. Leo just stared at his father, his face a blank canvas of shock. The golden boy was finally seeing that the gold was not his by divine right, but had been strip-mined from his family's future, and the mine had just run dry. The power dynamic in the room had been fundamentally rewritten. Frank, the lifelong CEO of our family, was facing a hostile takeover, and his board, my mother and I, had all the votes. It was my mother who broke the silence. She spoke softly, but her voice cut through the tension with the precision of a scalpel. "Frank," she said, looking directly at her ex-husband. "She's right. This has to stop. It should have stopped years ago. I let it go on for too long because I didn't want to fight. I'm done not fighting. This is what's happening. For my sake, for Samantha's sake, and maybe, if you could ever see it, for Leo's sake too." That was the final blow. With his last potential ally now firmly in my corner, Frank's shoulders slumped in defeat. The fight went out of him, replaced by a weary, bitter resignation. He reached for the pen, his hand trembling slightly. He pulled the documents from the folder and without another word, he signed each one. The quitclaim deed, the loan agreement. His signature was shaky, a pale imitation of his usual confident scrawl. Then he pushed the papers towards Leo. "Sign it," he croaked, his voice raspy. Leo looked at the documents, then at me. For the first time, I saw something other than resentment in his eyes. It was fear, real, profound fear of a future where he was responsible for himself. He picked up the pen and signed his name next to our father's on the loan agreement and on the personal conduct contract. The deal was done. They left soon after, not with a bang, but with a whimper. They didn't say goodbye. They simply walked out of my apartment, two diminished men, leaving the signed documents on my desk. After the door closed, I let out a bria. I didn't realize I had been holding for my entire adult life. My mother came over and wrapped her arms around me. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "You were so strong." I hugged her back, feeling the weight of years of silent frustration finally begin to lift. We had not just won a battle, we had ended a war. The aftermath was exactly what the lawyer had predicted, a complete fracturing of our old family bonds, making way for something new to potentially grow. My relationship with my father became transactional. Once a month, I received an email notification that a payment of $597.22 had been deposited into my account. We didn't speak otherwise. The warmth, however performative it had been, was gone. In its place was a cold, respectful distance. He had lost his power over me, and without it, he didn't seem to know how to interact with me at all. Leo, to my genuine surprise, complied with the terms. He found a full-time job as a receiving manager at a large retail store. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. He sent me scanned receipts from his therapy sessions every week. About 6 months after the meeting, he called me. It was an awkward, stilted conversation. He apologized, Not just for the laptop, but for everything. I never realized what Dad was doing, he said, his voice quiet. I just took it. I never thought about where it was coming from. I'm sorry, Sam. It wasn't a magic fix, but it was a start. Our relationship is still a work in progress. It's fragile, being rebuilt on a new foundation of honesty and boundaries instead of entitlement and resentment. We talk occasionally. I don't know if we'll ever be close in the way I once dreamed we could be, but we are, for the first time, honest with each other. My life is my own now, fully and completely. I used the money from Frank's repayments to create a separate investment account, a reclamation fund, as I call it. My freelance career is thriving again, and I'm on track to buy my own home within the year. My relationship with my mother has never been stronger. With her financial future secure, a weight has been lifted from her as well. She started traveling, something she always wanted to do. Sometimes, late at night when I'm working on my new laptop, the one I paid for with the first installment of their debt, I think about the old family dynamic, the golden boy and the dutiful daughter. It occurs to me that my father was right about one thing: I am safe. My career is safe. My finances are safe. My future is safe. But I achieved that safety not by being boring or uninspired, but by being strategic, ruthless, and unwilling to be a line item in someone else's budget. I didn't just change everything for my family, I reclaimed everything for myself. And that is a victory that no spreadsheet can ever fully quantify.